The wind howled like a wounded beast, rattling the glass windows of the high-rise office building where I worked as a night security guard. Thunder cracked through the sky, and sheets of rain poured down, turning the city's streets into rivers. I was making my usual rounds when I spotted a figure huddled near the entrance, drenched and shivering. The woman, clad in an expensive-looking trench coat, looked desperate. I hesitated for a split second. Rules were strict about letting strangers in. But then I saw her trembling hands, the way her breath came out in quick, uneven gasps. She wasn't a threat. She was just human. I pushed open the door. "Ma'am, come inside before you freeze to death," I said, motioning her in. She hesitated before stepping inside, her entire frame quaking. "Thank you," she whispered, voice hoarse from the cold. I led her to the lobby's small heater. "Wait here. I'll get you something warm." I left my post, rushed to the break room, and returned with a steaming cup of coffee. Her fingers, pale and wet, wrapped around it as if it was her lifeline. "You didn't have to do this," she said, lifting her eyes to mine. They were dark, but filled with something deeper. Exhaustion. Maybe. "It's just coffee," I shrugged, offering a small smile. "No big deal." She exhaled a small, shaky laugh. "You'd be surprised how rare kindness is." For the next hour, we talked. I learned her name was Olivia, and she had been caught in the storm after her car broke down. She didn't mention what she did for a living, and I didn't ask. She asked about me instead. "Do you like being a security guard?" she asked, her voice gentle, but probing. I hesitated. "It's a job, not what I dreamed of, but pays the bills." She tilted her head. "What did you dream of?" I sighed. "Acting." The word tasted almost bitter. I wanted to be an actor, but dreams don't pay rent. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Would you be willing to take a chance?" I frowned. "On what?" She smiled. "Something bigger than this." Before I could press her for details, she stood up. "Thank you for the shelter. I won't forget this." And then, she was gone, disappearing into the storm. A month later, I was back on shift, doing my round like always. Life had returned to normal, and I had nearly forgotten about Olivia, until my phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Carter," a formal voice asked. "We're calling on behalf of Olivia Moreau." I nearly dropped the phone. Olivia Moreau, the award-winning film producer. The woman responsible for some of the biggest box office hits in history. "She would like you to audition for a lead role in her upcoming film," the voice continued. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Yeah, right. This is not a joke, Mr. Carter." My stomach twisted. This couldn't be real. It just couldn't. But then they sent me an email, a formal invitation to audition for one of the biggest films of the year. And my whole world flipped upside down. I stood outside the grand audition hall, heart hammering against my ribs. This can't be real. When I stepped inside, dozens of actors were already there, seasoned professionals, people who had spent their whole lives in this industry. I didn't belong here. Then, I spotted Olivia standing at the far end of the room, watching me with a knowing smirk. "You showed up," she said. "You weren't kidding?" My voice cracked slightly. She shook her head. "I never joke about talent. Now go. Show them why you deserve to be here." I swallowed hard, walking to the front. The casting director called my name. The script was in my shaking hands. And then I began. The room fell silent as I delivered my lines. I could feel the energy shift. The air grew heavier, charged with something I couldn't describe. They were watching, really watching. When I finished, the silence stretched on. Then Olivia stood up. "I've seen enough," she said. I braced for rejection. She turned to the casting director. "He's the one." The next few weeks were a blur. I was cast as the lead. Me, a security guard with no prior acting experience, was now starring in one of the biggest films of the year. And when movie posters were released, my face was everywhere. Bus stops, billboards, theaters. People who once ignored me now whispered when I walked by. My phone was flooded with messages from people who never gave me the time of day before. And Olivia? She just watched with a knowing smile. "You have no idea what's coming," she said. She was right. Because the moment the movie hit theaters, my life changed forever. Fame wasn't as glamorous as I thought. Paparazzi followed me everywhere. Reporters twisted my words. People who once looked down on me suddenly acted like they had always been my best friends. And then, There were those who hated my success, jealous actors, bitter critics, even people from my old life, co-workers who sneered, saying I was just lucky, but they didn't see the nights I spent doubting myself. The anxiety, the imposter syndrome. I wasn't just some security guard anymore. I was someone people recognized, someone they wanted to see fail. And failing was the last thing I was going to do. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One of my closest friends, someone I had trusted, leaked false stories to the tabloids. He's arrogant now. He thinks he's better than everyone. He's not even that talented. My name was dragged through the mud. And Olivia, she watched it all unfold with sharp, observant eyes. Then, one evening, she called me. Are you ready to fight back? I took her advice. I didn't play the victim. I let my work speak for itself. The next role I took, a gritty, emotional drama that left audiences in tears. Critics who once doubted me were forced to admit, I wasn't just lucky. I was good. And the best part, the so-called friend who tried to ruin me, he faded into irrelevance. At the premiere of my latest film, Olivia stood beside me, pride in her eyes. Still think this was all a mistake? She asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. No. She smirked. Good. I turned, facing the flashing cameras, knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't luck. This was meant to be. Fame wasn't just a spotlight. It was a crushing weight pressing down on me. Everywhere I went, eyes followed. People no longer saw me as just another guy in the crowd. I was someone. My name, my face, it all carried an expectation now. And expectations, they were suffocating. After my breakout film success, producers, agents, and journalists swarmed me. They wanted to know what was next, what masterpiece I would deliver next. I wanted to scream that I didn't know, that I wasn't sure if I even deserved this. But I couldn't, because in this world, hesitation meant weakness. I had to pretend I had it all figured out, pretend I wasn't terrified of failing, pretend I belonged. And the only person who saw through the act, Olivia. One night, after another long, exhausting day of meetings, interviews, and training, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment. The once exciting energy of my new life had turned into a grind, a never-ending cycle of work and expectations. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. This wasn't the same guy who once worked night shifts as a security guard, dreaming of something more. This guy, he was tired, empty, lost. Then my phone rang. Olivia. Carter, she said, her voice steady but firm. I need you to get out of your head. I scoffed. Easy for you to say. You're Olivia Morrow. You've been in this industry for years. And yet, I still fight for my place every damn day, she shot back. You think success means you've made it? No, it means the real fight has just begun. I stayed silent. She sighed. Come to my office tomorrow. You need a wake-up call. I didn't know what she meant. But the next day, I would find out. And it would change everything. I arrived at Olivia's office the next morning, expecting a motivational speech. Instead, she handed me a thick file. Read it. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. Inside were lists of actors, producers, and filmmakers who had once been on top, only to vanish. Some had been ruined by scandals, others by addiction, and many more by simple irrelevance. This industry doesn't care about you, Olivia said bluntly. One wrong move, and you're replaced. One bad film, and you're forgotten. I swallowed hard. Then why did you choose me? A slow smile spread across her lips. Because you have something they don't. I waited, heart pounding. You have hunger. You know what it's like to have nothing. That's what keeps people in this game. I clenched my fists. So what do I do? She leaned forward. You survive. That night, I lay awake, Olivia's words replaying in my head. I had come from nothing. I knew how to fight. So I made a choice. I would not be another name on that forgotten list. I would not let them push me out. I would survive, and I would do it my way. But surviving meant facing the ones who wanted me to fail. The industry was ruthless, and the moment I started rising, the knives came out. Tabloids started twisting my words. Journalists painted me as an overnight success with no real talent. Even some of my co-stars whispered behind my back, jealous that I had landed roles they had spent years chasing. The worst betrayal? My old boss from the security job, the one who had once ignored me, belittled me, and barely paid me enough to survive, was now selling interviews. He was just an average guy, my boss sneered in a viral interview. I don't see the hype. He used to clean floors and check badges. That's not an actor. That's a fraud. The internet ate it up. Doubt crept in. Was I really a fraud? Did I deserve this? And then Olivia called. Turn on the TV, she said. I did. And when I saw shut everyone up. It was a live interview with a respected director, a man known for being brutally honest. When asked about me, he smirked. You know what I love about Carter? He said. He wasn't handed anything. He walked into that audition and made everyone else look like amateurs. He didn't just deserve that role. He owned it. The interviewer raised an eyebrow. But there are rumors that he was just lucky. The director laughed. Luck doesn't make you stand in a storm. Luck doesn't give you raw, undeniable talent. Carter is the real deal. And anyone saying otherwise, they're just bitter. And just like that, the narrative shifted. People started defending me. Fans called out the lies. And those who had tried to tear me down, they faded into silence. I could have let it go, but I didn't. Instead, I used my next interview to say one thing. To my old boss, I said, staring straight at the camera, thank you for doubting me. Because your doubt, it only made me stronger. The video went viral. People loved it. And my old boss, he vanished from the media. Lesson learned. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with success. One night, as I prepared for another red carpet event, my phone rang. A number I hadn't seen in years. My father, the man who had walked out on me when I was just a kid. The man who had never supported my dreams. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. I could ignore it, move on, but something inside me whispered, face it. So I answered. Carter, he said, voice hesitant. It's been a long time. I exhaled slowly. Yeah, it has. And as we spoke, I realized something. I didn't need his validation. I didn't need his approval. I had made it without him. And that was the greatest victory of all. Fame was a storm. But now, I wasn't just surviving it. I was standing in the eye of it. And I was stronger than ever. One evening, as I walked the red carpet, Olivia stood beside me, watching the cameras flash. You did it, she said. I smirked. I had a good mentor. She laughed. You're not that security guard anymore, Carter. I turned to her. No, but I'll never forget him. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking over the glittering city. A storm raged in the distance, thunder rumbling. And I smiled, because once a storm had brought her into my life, and that single moment of kindness had changed everything. I had survived, and I had won. Success had given me everything, fame, wealth, respect. But with it came something unexpected, ghosts from my past. People who had ignored me when I was a struggling security guard suddenly reappeared, acting as if they had always believed in me. Old classmates, former co-workers, distant relatives, all reaching out, wanting a piece of my success. And then there were the apologies. I always knew you had talent. I'm so proud of you, man. We should catch up sometime. They weren't proud of me. They were proud of themselves for knowing me before I made it big. But I didn't owe them anything. So I made a decision. I would never look back. Not everyone from my past was like that. A handful of people, those who had truly cared about me before the fame, stayed by my side without expecting anything. One of them was my old coworker, Jake. Jake had been my closest friend when we worked together at the security job. Unlike the others, he didn't pretend to be impressed by my success. You're still Carter to me, he said when we met up for lunch. I don't care about the movies. I just want to know if you're happy. I blinked. Happy? It was such a simple question, but it hit me harder than any interview ever had. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. That night, as I lay in my expensive apartment, staring at the ceiling, Jake's question echoed in my mind. Was I happy? I had everything now, money, success, fame. But what about peace? What about fulfillment? For so long, I had been running, fighting to prove myself. But now that I had reached the top, where was I supposed to go next? I found myself at Olivia's office again. She studied me for a long moment before speaking. You've hit the ceiling, she said. I frowned. What do you mean? You've reached everything you thought you wanted, she said, leaning back in her chair. Now you need to figure out what's next. I scoffed. You say that like it's easy. It's not. She met my gaze. That's why most people fall apart after they make it. Because they don't know what to do next. She leaned forward. So, Carter, tell me, what do you want now? For days, that question haunted me. What do I want now? Another big movie? More fame? More money? None of it felt right. Then, one night, I drove past the old building where I had worked as a security guard. I parked outside, staring at it, remembering the man I used to be, the man who had nothing. And suddenly, it hit me. I didn't just want to be an actor. I wanted to create. I wanted to tell stories that mattered. I didn't just want to be a face on a poster. I wanted to change lives. The next morning, I walked into Olivia's office with a new plan. I want to start my own production company, I said. She raised an eyebrow. That's a big step. I know, I said, but I want to help people like me. People who don't have connections, who just need a chance. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive again. Olivia studied me, then smiled. Then let's make it happen. Starting my own company wasn't easy. People doubted me. Critics said I was just another actor trying to play producer. But I didn't care. Because the first film my company produced, it was a movie about a young security guard who gave a stranger shelter during a storm. And the lead role, I gave it to an unknown actor, someone who reminded me of myself. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for me. I was fighting for everyone who deserved a chance. The premiere of my first film was surreal. As I stood in front of the crowd, looking at the flashing cameras, I realized something. I had become the person I once needed. And as the credits rolled, I turned to Olivia. Do you regret giving me a chance that night? I asked. She smirked. Not for a second. That night, as I walked to my car, the sky rumbled with thunder. Another storm. I looked up, remembering the first storm, the one that had changed my life. And I smiled. Because this time, I wasn't afraid of the rain. This time, I was ready for whatever came next. I wasn't just a security guard anymore. I wasn't just an actor. I was a storyteller. And this was just the beginning.